They say the Romans gave us roads, law and architecture, but they also gave us this: a man tied to a post, screaming as a god watched, and 50,000 people cheered. Welcome to the amphitheatre. Smells like roasted barley, sweat and old blood. The stone seats are hot under bare thighs, because shade is for senators. And you're not a senator. You're not even really a person anymore. You're the condemned. And the condemned don't get shade, or names. You're led in under armed guard, feet scraping sand that's been soaked in more blood than wine at a bacchanalia. Your wrists are raw from the manacles, your stomach's empty. The chains rattle, and it's not dramatic. They just never stop moving. There's an old wound on your shin. You got it when they dragged you out of your cell. It oozes now. No one cares. The crowd notices you, not because you matter, but because your entrance interrupts the betting. Someone yells your name wrong. Someone else throws a date pit. Laughter. Somewhere, a noblewoman lifts her veil to get a better look at your skin. She'll describe it later at dinner. You're the flavour of the day. You blink against the sun. It reflects off steel helmets and the polished marble of the podium, where a bored official slouches. He'll give the signal. He doesn't care what you did. Theft, blasphemy, political satire. It's all just syllables to him. The only thing he wants is a good reaction, a twitch, a scream. Maybe a confession, if you're feeling poetic. You're shirtless now. When did that happen? It's hard to remember. Time in the holding cells drips slowly, like sweat down your spine. The guards told you to pray. Not to your gods, of course, to theirs, Mars, Jupiter, Caesar. The line between divine and human is thin here, and crosses get people nailed. And then there's the philosopher. Yes, the other one in the cage beside yours. He hasn't spoken in hours. He just stares ahead, lips moving silently. He's here for writing things that made people uncomfortable. Truth, apparently, has a price. And today, that price is public anatomical theatre. You're watching Hushed Historian, where truth whispers through time. If you enjoy what I dig up for you, subscribe so we don't lose our little historical connection. Thank you. Back to you. The ropes are tight. You're spread on a crossbeam now. Not crucified. That's later, if you're special. This is just humiliation. Exposure. Your legs shake, not from fear, from hunger. From the ache that started 3 nights ago and never left. The doctor said you'd die quickly. But the doctor also bet 3 denarii on you lasting at least 10 minutes. The first lash doesn't land. It slices. A leather whip, tipped with bone or metal, whatever makes the best noise. The sound isn't a scream, not at first. It's a wet slap, followed by silence. Then comes the roar. The crowd approves. Your skin bubbles up in welts. Hot blood trails down your ribs like molasses. You try not to scream. They love screams. They drink them. You give them nothing. But that wasn't even the worst part, because you can hear the philosopher now. He's chanting something. Not words, just syllables. The kind that crawl into your spine and unwrap your dignity 1 vertebra at a time. He's not afraid. That's what breaks you, not the pain. The contrast. You're dying like an animal. He's dying like a prophet. He's looking straight into the sun, unblinking. You close your eyes, then a horn blares. Time for the next act. You're not the star, just the opening show. The real entertainment? Lions, maybe tigers, maybe a criminal dressed like a mythological figure being devoured alive in front of a painted backdrop. The gods love irony. But first the crowd gets you. You're not killed, not yet. They want to see you break. And you're getting close. The edges of your vision flicker. Your hands twitch. The sand beneath you is sticky now. You're lying in the sweat of yesterday's heretic. You smell like him too. And just when it couldn't get more absurd, the philosopher starts laughing. Not a madman's cackle, worse, a low, serene chuckle that rises like smoke from a temple incense burner. He's bleeding from the mouth, but it doesn't seem to matter. Maybe he's finally lost his grip. Maybe he never had it to begin with. Or maybe, and this is the part that makes your stomach knot harder than the lashes ever did, maybe he understands something you don't. A guard kicks you onto your side. Your back is a raw mess of torn flesh and dirt. The sun needles your skin like you're being slowly roasted alive, one cell at a time. You try to breathe, but the air tastes like copper and ash. Someone spits near your face. It might have been a child. You don't look. You're hauled to your knees. Hands yank your arms back into manacles which are now crusted with a mixture of your own blood and someone else's from earlier. They don't wipe them down. Sanitation is not part of the Roman spectacle. The guards bark orders. The philosopher is being untied, slowly, ceremoniously, like he's being invited to dinner rather than executed. The crowd murmurs. They don't like this part, not because it's too cruel, but because it's too quiet. The silence stretches. You think maybe they'll let him speak. Maybe this is his moment. It is. He turns, face battered but composed, and looks out over the crowd with the calm detachment of a man giving a lecture. His mouth opens, but instead of words, blood pours out. That's it. No wisdom. No last philosophical zinger. Just blood. The guards shrug and one drives a blade between his ribs. No poetry, no pause. The crowd erupts. Not in horror, in applause. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear what happens next. Because you, the one who screamed too early, who failed to break like a man of principle, you're not allowed to die. Not yet. You're too useful, too ordinary. The kind of body that bleeds well. You're going back down, below the seats. Beneath the arena, into the belly. The tunnels are colder. That's the first thing you notice. The second is the smell. Rot, piss, old metal, and wet hair. Everything echoes down here. Chains, whispers, your own thoughts, amplified until they stop sounding like yours. You're dumped beside a pile of straw. There's a bucket. Not for water. You figure it out. Around you are others. The not quite dead. Men with missing fingers, broken jaws, collapsed lungs that wheeze like dying accordions. No one speaks. The guards don't tell you what's coming next. But you know. This is the holding zone for repeat acts. For prisoners too boring to die all at once. Your background now. A reusable corpse in training. They'll clean you just enough to keep the rot from setting in. Not enough to make you comfortable. You're not supposed to be comfortable. You're supposed to exist in a state of quiet agony. The kind that softens the brain, makes you pliable, easy to reposition, easy to discard. They give you water. It's warm. Tastes like old bronze and salt. You drink it anyway. From the other cell, you hear moaning. Not pain, pleasure. Someone above is reenacting a myth, probably Europa and the bull, meaning there's sex on the sand while you try to keep your insides from falling out. The Romans love variety. The man beside you mutters a name. His child's name, maybe. He says it over and over like a spell. You don't stop him. It's the only sacred thing in this place. A rat scurries by. You don't flinch. Rats mean something's edible. Somewhere. Your back sticks to the stone wall. Blood becomes glue. You close your eyes. Then footsteps. Someone's coming. They're dragging something. Wood. A frame. The guard kicks the cell. On your feet, he says. You try, but something darker was coming, and it had wheels. They drag in a frame. Tall, spoked, oiled. The kind of thing you'd expect to find in a carpenter's workshop. Except this one groans. Like it remembers every scream it's ever heard. It's not a tool, it's a memory machine. And you're the next engraving. They don't say your name. They say, the survivor. It's not a compliment. It means your limbs are still attached, your eyes still blink. That's enough. You're dragged, not walked, to the centre of the room, where torchlight flickers off damp stone and rusted chains. The walls sweat. So do you. Your hands are bound again. Ankles too. The restraints bite into fresh wounds, reopening your back like an old book no one should have reread. You're lifted, roughly, onto the wheels, flat axis, arms pulled above your head, feet yanked downward until your spine plays a scale of cracks. You make a noise, not a scream. Something closer to a sob choked on ash. The executioner doesn't smile. That would be too human. He checks the knots like a merchant examining a delivery. The crowd above doesn't see this. They only hear it later. A muffled crack. A voice that doesn't sound human. The the soundtrack of empire. There's no fanfare, no speech, just the wheel turning. Slowly, deliberately, each notch stretching you further. The pressure builds like fire in your joints. Knees scream. Shoulders dislocate with a pop so sharp it echoes. You see stars, real ones, not poetic metaphors. Your body leaves you. What's left is just meat, struggling to maintain shape. And yet, you don't pass out. Your mind, traitorous thing, refuses to give you mercy. You stay awake, lucid, drowning in each inch of pain. A priest watches, he takes notes. Something about tolerances. He's not here to absolve. He's here to document resilience or failure. Both are holy. In the next cell, someone sings, high, thin, tuneless, maybe a lullaby, maybe madness with rhythm. Either way, it keeps you anchored. You breathe in time with the notes, counting seconds between rotations. 5, 10, twist. The number doesn't matter. You just need one more. Always one more. The guard murmurs something about philosophy. He screamed, you know, he says, like it's a joke. Even the wise don't like crushed ribs. They're breaking you in pieces, not out of cruelty, but method. The Romans believed the body and soul were twins. Linked, yes, but individually corruptible. Break the body slowly, and you watch the soul squirm. It's educational. Blood slicks your thighs. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. You try to beg, but there's no word for stop in Latin that matters in this room. They're not trying to kill you. They're trying to show others what unbreaking looks like. Torture, after all, is theatre, and every theatre needs a protagonist with a slow demise. Eventually, the wheel stops. You're limp now, breathing barely. The guards argue. One wants to finish you. The other suggests the next group needs practice. You're lowered, gently, as a sack of grain, onto a slab. The slab is cold. You're grateful for that. It means you're still alive enough to feel it. They don't dress your wounds. They sprinkle vinegar. It stings so hard your legs kick out reflexively. One heel cracks against the stone. You don't feel it. Good. One less thing to remember. A new prisoner is brought in. A woman. She stares at you, not in horror, in calculation. She's learning. You are the textbook. They leave you there, flat, open, unnamed. And yet, in that stillness, something shifts. A voice from the shadows, soft, feminine. She recites a line from Virgil, about endurance, about how even suffering writes itself into legacy. You want to answer, but your jaw is cracked and your mouth is full of copper. You try anyway. Let's go back a bit, to the day you were taken. It wasn't a dramatic arrest. No storming of doors, no soldiers kicking over tables. Just a knock. A soft, deliberate knock. And then a scroll. Sealed. Official. Detainment for civic disruption. You laughed, until you saw the signature. It wasn't from a magistrate. It was from a patron, a man you once quoted in praise. Apparently, quoting him in public now counted as sedition. The Senate had shifted moods. Philosophy was fine in private, but in the streets, in poems, that made people uncomfortable, and discomfort made instability. So you were taken, quietly, efficiently. Rome didn't need grand displays to destroy you. It had forms, and the cruelty of bureaucracy was always cleaner than blades. Your first night in the cell was oddly warm, not from hospitality, but from proximity. 6 others shared the stone room. One pissed himself. One mumbled prayers in Greek. The rest didn't speak. You didn't either, not at first, but by night 3 the silence became unbearable. So you talked, told stories, sang fragments of epics, quoted Cicero with a cracked smile. Someone chuckled, someone else wept. By the end of the week you were the teacher, not officially, just informally. Like everything else in Rome, titles were flexible, until they weren't. The guards began noticing. That was your first mistake. Wisdom, in Rome, was suspicious if it came from a body not wrapped in purple. You weren't a senator. You weren't born with a cognomen. You had no right to influence thought. They started pulling you out more often. Interrogations, they called them. But no one asked questions. They just made you bleed. Once, a guard asked if you had family. You didn't answer. The wrong answer was worse than silence. They brought in the philosopher after that. The real one, with the eyes like cold fire and the breath that smelled of old parchment. He recognized you, knew your name, recited your verse. You felt seen, and then instantly more vulnerable than ever before. Truth, he said one night, is like salt. Too much and it burns, but without it, everything rots. You laughed, he didn't, and that's when the dreams started. They weren't dreams, really, more like fevered reruns of your own memories, warped by pain and darkness. You saw your mother's face, Vicky, but it was twisted, mouth sewn shut. You saw the Senate chamber, filled with dogs in togas. You saw your own hands, covered in ink that turned to blood. The philosopher said it was normal. Your mind, he whispered, is trying to digest pain, but it has no teeth for this kind. Eventually, you stopped sleeping. When they dragged you to the arena, you were already half gone. The sunlight felt wrong, too wide, too bright, like judgment. The crowd didn't look like people. They looked like a single breathing entity. A mouth made of thousands of faces, all screaming for your end. And now you're here again, on the slab, broken, open, listening. The woman from earlier, the one with the Virgil verse, she sits near your feet. Not bound, not bleeding, not yet. She speaks Latin like it's silk, smooth, weighted. She doesn't flinch when she looks at you. She reaches out and wipes a thread of blood from your lip. Not kindly, practically, like she's taking inventory. You spoke once in the forum, she says, about dignity. You remember, barely. They made me watch, she adds, to see what dignity looks like when it's being dissected. You want to answer, but all you can do is blink. She nods. That's enough. Sometimes even a blink survives the empire. Then she stands, walks back to her place in line, and you realise what she meant. You are the demonstration. She is the student. Your agony has become instruction. And just when you think the lesson is over, footsteps again. Louder, heavier, carrying something wet. The smell hits first. Not rot, not blood. Something stranger, like boiled leather and bile. You try to lift your head. It barely shifts. Muscles don't respond anymore. They negotiate, and yours are ready to mutiny. The sound is dragging, rhythmic. A body? No, something heavier than a corpse. And then you see it. A bull's head. Not attached to a bull. Hollowed, polished bronze, carried by two men in striped tunics. Behind them, a third man walks barefoot, his feet already dark with ash. He holds a poker, red-tipped, still glowing faintly. He smiles. The crowd above has hushed. That's the worst part. Silence means attention. They're leaning in, watching, waiting for the next act of this sacred horror play. They set the thing down beside you. The brazen bull. You've heard the stories, thought they were exaggerations, propaganda, theatre myths, but now it's here, real, with flared nostrils and an open door in the side, big enough for one body. Yours. You're not chosen, not yet. They need someone louder, someone with a voice. You're too broken, too quiet. So they pick the woman, the one who quoted Virgil. She doesn't resist. That unnerves everyone more than a scream would. Her face is calm, almost bored, as if she's reading ahead in the script and knows the ending already. They strip her, push her toward the metal beast. Her feet bleed as they drag across sand. She glances once, only once, in your direction. No plea, just recognition. You are the future, she refused. The warning she heard. They stuff her inside. The executioner seals the hatch. It clanks shut like a tombstone slamming down. The poker slides into the furnace beneath. The fire roars to life with unnatural speed. The bull begins to glow, slowly, first in patches, then fully. The metal skin turns orange, then red. The room fills with the scent of burning hair and something more organic, a smell you will never forget and can never describe. And then the sound begins. The bull was designed for this. acoustics shaped by obsession. Her screams echo through chambers that turn human agony into melody. It's music. Hideous, beautiful music. The audience claps. Some weep. One man falls to his knees, convinced he's heard the voice of a goddess. You wretch. Nothing comes up. You haven't eaten in days. Your stomach clenches on emptiness. The guards don't look away. They've seen this before. They study the bull like it's a lesson. And maybe it is. Rome teaches in blood, bone, and heat. And the curriculum never ends. Eventually the sound stops. Not all at once. A tapering, a hiss, a final breath that sounds like wind through reeds. The hatch is opened. Steam billows out. What's inside is no longer a woman. Just charcoal in the shape of a lesson. They'll bury what's left, or maybe display it. Depends on the mood of the official in charge. You are still alive, which at this point feels like a punishment. Your skin itches with dried blood. Your ears ring. Your mouth tastes like iron and silence. Then mere twist. A guard kneels beside you. Not roughly, not gently. He holds something wrapped in cloth. It's your writing. Pages you thought were burned. Pages you wrote before any of this. He unwraps them carefully, places them on the stone beside you. They found this in your cell, he says. They didn't like it, but I did. You try to ask why. No sound comes. He shrugs. It made me feel seen. Then he stands, leaves, doesn't take the pages. You stare at them. Your words, your thoughts, the parts of you that didn't bleed, and you understand the true punishment now. Not death, not pain, survival. Survival means remembering everything, and that's only just begun. The remembering. Because now the silence is thicker than the screams ever were. You lie on your side, spine curled like a burnt scroll, next to your own forbidden words. The parchment flutters slightly from the draft, as if it's breathing, mocking you. Every sound echoes, not just from the arena above, but from inside your skull. The hiss of the brazen bull still plays behind your eyes, its melody permanently etched onto your brain's blackboard. No amount of blinking erases it. The guard who left the pages is gone, probably regretting it. Or worse, he's read more. Understood too much. And in Rome, understanding is more dangerous than theft. You knew that once. Forgot. The wheel reminded you. You try to read the pages, but your vision doubles. Ink swims. Words blur. But you don't need to read them. You remember them. Every verse. Every line about dignity, power, mercy, irony. Your tongue cracks against your teeth as you try to whisper one of the lines. Just one. For the woman. For the philosopher. For yourself. It comes out broken. Less poetry, more breath with ideas attached. But it's still yours. From the far end of the dungeon comes a sound that doesn't belong here. Laughter. Soft. Almost embarrassed. It belongs to a man who sounds too clean for this place. You shift slightly, enough to catch the shape of a figure leaning casually against the wall. Cloaked. Hooded. Not a guard, not a prisoner. Something else. He steps forward. His boots are polished. The soles don't squeak. That's how you know he's important. Well, he says, that was quite a performance. You stare. I mean it. The wheel, the slabbing, the blood and philosophy. Very moving. I especially like the part where your ribs snapped on beat 3. He crouches next to you. His breath smells like wine and roasted meat. It makes your stomach twist. Do you know what you are now? He asks. You don't answer. You can't. A relic, he says. A reminder. A useful piece of human cautionary art. You've officially graduated from man to metaphor. Congratulations. He smiles. It doesn't reach his eyes. Then he does something unexpected. He opens a small satchel and takes out wax, sealing wax, and a stamp. Do you know how many officials have quoted you lately? He muses. It's fashionable now. Quoting martyrs makes them seem intelligent, empathetic, very in season. You twitch, reflexively. He notices. Oh yes, you're still in there, he grins. They'll say you died with dignity, which, as we both know, is the prettiest way to say you were killed correctly. He places the wax beside your manuscript. Then the seal. You recognise the crest, Senate approved. You're being archived, he says, sanitized, made palatable. And just when it couldn't get more absurd, he gently smooths out your blood-streaked writing with a cloth. For the scholars, he explains, and the children, don't want them getting too inspired. You want to laugh, but your lungs seize up. Pain is a language now, and your body's fluent. He stands satisfied. The torchlight casts his shadow long across the wall, like a question no one wants to ask. He leaves. The door clangs, and you are alone again, except for the parchment, the words and the slow, creeping realization that Rome doesn't just destroy its enemies, it recycles them. It wears them as masks, it quotes them in speeches and carves them into stone, so long as they die the right way, at the right volume, in the right pose. And you screamed too early, you bled too loud, so your memory will need editing. And that is the next phase of your punishment. To be rewritten, reduced, your suffering carved into digestible marble for noble courtyards. The same senators who funded your torture will now quote your final lines to impress mistresses and visiting Greeks. They'll leave out the shaking, the smell of your bowels loosening, the scream you couldn't stop. That's not elegant enough. You're not a man, you're a moral, a polished anecdote, a metaphorical fresco smeared over the real decay. Rome will build statues of your restraint and conveniently forget what happened to your hands. One of them doesn't close anymore. Your breath is a rattle now, but you force it into rhythm. Because if they're going to turn you into a story, you're going to choose which one. You reach toward the parchment, the one the smug archivist left beside you. The pages are crusted with blood. Your blood. It smears the ink into rivers, but some words still rise above the rot. Not the clever ones, not the polished verses, the angry ones, the lines that were too sharp to teach in schools. You whisper one, then another. The effort sends lightning through your ribs, but you keep going. Each word is a protest, a counterspell, against the seal, against the sanitizing hand of empire. You are not their puppet, not yet. From the corner, someone gasps. You didn't hear them enter. A young boy, barely more than a child, stands just inside the dungeon door, holding a bucket. His eyes are wide, not in horror, in wonder. He's seen the parchment. He's heard your voice. "Are you the one they burned?" he whispers. You blink once. He takes a step closer. "My uncle said you wrote a thing. About kings and ropes. That truth stretches but doesn't snap. You don't remember writing that, but it sounds like something you would have tried to believe." The boy kneels. You see his bare knees press into old straw and bone dust. "They say you screamed like a coward," he says. You close your eyes. "But I heard the guards say you didn't beg." You open them again. "Barely." The boy leans closer. His voice drops. "Did it hurt?" You want to laugh. You want to ask if the sun is warm, if knives are sharp. But you only have one word in you. "Yes." He nods like that confirms something sacred. Then he stands. And something wild happens. He bows. Not like a slave, not like a citizen, like a student. He takes a page, not the clean one soaked and torn. He tucks it under his tunic like a relic. Then he runs, just like that. He disappears into the torchlit hallway, barefoot and silent. You hear a guard shout somewhere. The boy's gone before the echo fades, and you're still bleeding, still broken, but suddenly you're not entirely lost, because one page made it out. One line, maybe two, will live longer than the wheel did. And if they tell the story wrong, maybe he'll correct them. That thought stays with you through the next wave of fever, through the next round of coughing, through the next scraping of metal on stone, as another victim is dragged past your feet. And just when you think the darkness will swallow you again, a voice. It's soft, raspy, from another cell. Was that your son? You want to say no. You want to say you've never seen him before, but part of you, some part deeper than blood or memory, whispers, maybe, because that's how stories survive, not in scrolls, not in stone, in the minds of children who see something broken and believe it was brave. The voice asking if he was your son lingers. You don't know who said it. It might have come from the cell beside you, or from your own head, cracked open so wide now that voices echo in from both sides of the veil. But you cling to it anyway, because it means someone else is still breathing, still listening. You try to move. Your ribs protest. Your spine feels carved from marble and regret. But your fingers twitch. That's something. You're still here. Still painfully, beautifully here. You press your palm to the blood-slick floor like a signature. Then the silence changes. It doesn't go away, it sharpens. Because up above, just faint enough to feel surreal, is music, not the screaming kind, not the twisted opera of the bull. Real music, strings, reeds, a procession. Someone important is arriving, a senator, a foreign dignitary, a bored emperor looking for inspiration. It doesn't matter who. What matters is what follows them. Entertainment. The prisoners stir. There's a shuffling of chains. Hope, dread. Hard to say anymore. But the tempo always changes when a highborn audience appears. Because Rome loves performance, and suffering is a premium act when it's curated. Footsteps descend. Guards again. Always guards. But this time, they're flanked by servants. Servants with perfume on their wrists, linen on their shoulders. Servants who look uncomfortable being this close to the rot of justice. You are selected. Of course you are. They don't ask. They never ask. One points, one nods, two grab. You're lifted like wet firewood. Limbs dangling, skin sticking. They grunt from the effort. You've lost weight, but dead weight moves differently. And you're still not dead. They carry you through a corridor lit by fresh torches. That's new. Someone important must be watching. The light makes the walls glow amber, and you see your reflection in the polished bronze of a passing shield. It's grotesque, beautifully so. A map of pain and resilience, a story no sculptor could ever capture. They reach a chamber, not the arena, something smaller, private, intimate. There's a raised platform in the centre, clean stone, cushions, incense burning in brass bowls, and seated casually on a couch of red-dyed linen is a woman, powerful, draped in silk that costs more than 10 villages. Hair coiled in gold, she's peeling a fig. Slowly, she does not look at you. One of the guards clears his throat. The philosopher, Domina. She finally glances up. Her eyes are sharp, empty, not cruel, just disinterested. Like a scholar inspecting a cracked vase. She stands, walks toward you. Her sandals are silent. You wrote the thing about mercy, she says. The one with the river metaphor. I liked it. You can't speak, but you nod, barely. She sighs. They tell me you screamed. That ruins it a little. But maybe it makes you more real. She turns away, paces once. I've arranged a private performance, she says. No lions, no fire, just dialogue. You'll recite what you remember. Or pretend to. Doesn't matter. They want feeling. She snaps her fingers. A scribe appears, scroll in hand. They'll take notes, she says. And later, we'll edit. The Empire needs stories. You finally understand. You are not being killed, you're being mined. Every nerve, every tremor, every cracked whisper, harvested for myth. They lower you to a chair. Strap your wrists gently. She sits opposite, eyes gleaming. Begin, she says. You try. And somewhere inside the ruined theatre of your skull, a curtain lifts. The show has begun. But not the one she expects. Your throat is scorched raw. Your lungs feel like hollow gourds, but you summon sound anyway. Not words, not yet. Just the ghost of your voice dragging itself out of exile. The room stills. Even the scribes lean in. The woman reclines again, one arm over the curve of her couch, the other idly tapping her goblet. Is that the opening? She asks, unimpressed. Try again, louder this time. You close your eyes, then you speak. Not the river metaphor, not the line about mercy, not any of the verses they etched into their memory like state-approved scripture. You start with the words you never wrote down, the ones you only said once to a dying man who asked if anything still mattered. You say, truth is the one thing they cannot crucify cleanly. It lands like a blade. She stiffens. The scribes don't know whether to write that down. One of them hesitates, eyes darting toward the woman, waiting for her cue. But she gives none. So you continue. You describe the underbelly of the arena, not with bitterness, but with the vivid chill of memory. The cold stone where your body was left to rot, the fever that peeled your vision into pieces, the rat that chewed your toe while you were still conscious enough to feel it. The man next to you who whispered songs to himself until he didn't. You speak like a ghost giving testimony. And slowly, the room begins to shift. Not in lighting, not in temperature, in tone. Because they expected you to perform, to deliver suffering like theatre. But what you give them is something else. Too slow, too sharp, too human. The woman interrupts. No, that's not the tone I want. It needs grandeur, pathos. You're not bleeding anymore. You're inspiring. Try again. You don't. Instead, you describe the guard who helped you piss when your body wouldn't obey, who didn't ask questions, who just placed the bucket and turned away. You describe the boy, the one who took your page. You don't name him. You don't have to. The scribes write faster now. The woman frowns. None of this is relevant, she says, but the scribe nearest her mutters. It's real. She hears that. Her eyes narrow. You go on. You speak of the philosopher's laugh, of the sound it made echoing through the bars like a hymn, of the way he stared at the sun without blinking, as if he could blind the gods by looking back harder. And you speak of the woman, the one in the bull, the way she looked at you before they shut the hatch, the way her scream was turned into art, into music, into state-sponsored catharsis. Enough, the silk woman hisses, but you're not done. You lean forward. Every tendon screams, but you do it anyway. Your voice rasps like torn vellum. You say, Rome will quote us, but Rome will never own us. She stands. Her goblet spills. She gestures. A guard moves forward unsure. You turn to the scribes. You meet their eyes. You say, write what they won't carve in marble. The youngest one, barely older than the boy who ran, nods, ever so slightly. The silk woman sees it. She moves fast, stepping down from the dais, fury blooming across her painted face. Erase it, she hisses. Erase him! But something's already shifted. In the torchlight, your voice is a shadow they can't silence. Not now. The guard hesitates. For a moment, nobody breathes. Then another figure enters the room, robed, hooded, carrying a message, and just when you think it's over, he speaks your name. Your real one. The one Rome erased. Not the title they gave you. Not the philosopher, the traitor, or the voice. Your name. The syllables of your childhood. The ones your mother used when her hands were full of laundry and anger, and the streets smelled of figs and sewage. The name whispered only in the back alleys of your dreams. The woman freezes. The scribes freeze. You do not. Because names are anchors, and hearing yours again is like your spine snapping back into place after being bent under Empire's boot. The hooded figure lowers his cowl. You know him. Not well, not personally, but you remember him on the edge of a crowd once years ago. Listening. Always listening. A minor clerk. A nobody with eyes too bright to stay a nobody. Now he stands with a wax tablet, seal freshly broken, and the kind of stillness that suggests nothing he does is unintentional. He hands the tablet to the silk woman. She reads it. Her painted lips twitch. Then she laughs. A cold, calculated laugh, like coins clinking into an empty purse. Well, she says, it seems you've become inconvenient. You try to ask how. You don't need to. She explains anyway. There's a new prefect, younger, wants reform, thinks suffering should be measured. She sneers at the word like it offends her palate. Your words are spreading. You've become a liability. You blink. That's all you can do. The hooded man speaks now. His voice is low, trained, like he's used to being obeyed. He's to be moved, reassigned to the provincial archives. No more performances, no more statements. Buried alive then, the woman says. No, the man replies. Buried literate. The silence that follows is worse than the shouting, because she knows it's over. Not for you. For her. The scribes look at her unsure. The guards shift. Take him, the hooded man says. And just like that, you're lifted again. But this time, there's no cruelty. No yanking or dragging. They carry you like something delicate. Not because they care, but because someone important does. They take you through different halls, quieter ones. You pass statues of men who never bled, with eyes carved too perfect to have seen truth. Their gaze slides off you like oil. The air changes, cooler, less scented, less watched. A cart waits outside. Real sunlight hits your face. It burns beautifully. The hooded man rides beside you, no guards. Just 2 oxen and the rattling of wheels over Roman stone. You ask in a voice like rusted hinges, "Why?" He answers without looking. Because empires don't fear traitors, they fear narratives. You try to laugh, it comes out as a cough. He doesn't smile. He looks tired, but resolved. "You weren't supposed to survive the wheel," he says, "but you did. You weren't supposed to speak, but you did. They tried to make you forget your name, and now everyone knows it again." You close your eyes, the cart rolls on. Villagers watch you pass, some curious, some indifferent. One woman makes the sign against evil. You don't blame her. Your body is still broken, but the story isn't. The man hands you a scroll. "When you're strong enough," he says, "keep writing." You hold it. The parchment feels like possibility. He leans in, almost whispering, "We don't need another martyr. We need a witness." You don't answer, but inside, somewhere deep and scarred and still burning, you are no longer Rome's entertainment. You are its memory. And memories don't die easy, but they do fade, twist, get rewritten. That's the part they never warn you about. Not the torture, not the loss. The way history bends under pressure, like heated metal. The way your story starts to belong to other people, men with cleaner hands and louder voices. You're not even in the archives yet, and already rumours beat you there. The hooded man calls you a witness, but witnesses still bleed. You do. Every time you shift, a scab tears. Every breath is a negotiation. The wheel left you unable to straighten fully, so your body now curves inward, like it's protecting something, or bracing for more. The cart moves slower, the further from Rome you go. The road gets rougher. Trees replace marble. The scent of incense fades, replaced by soil, manure, and distance. Villagers don't bow. They stare. You look like a prophet or a curse. Maybe both. At night, you dream of the woman in silk. Not her face, her hands. Always reaching, always reshaping the air, like she was trying to edit reality itself. She probably still is. She'll tell another version, one where you begged, where you confessed, where your words were her idea, and people will believe her, because survival complicates sainthood. A martyr who keeps talking becomes inconvenient. On the 3rd day, the cart arrives at the provincial archives. You expected a dungeon, a barracks, a quiet place to be ignored. What you get is a library, not grand, but real. A stone building near a river, 2 scribes, an old woman who smells like rosemary and ink. She greets you not with a salute or a bow, but with a basin of warm water. She washes your face, no ceremony, just cloth and kindness. It nearly breaks you more than the wheel. She doesn't ask who you are. She already knows, but she doesn't say your name. Like it's a brand. She says it like she's returning it to you. Inside, the library's cool, dark, lined with scrolls, some damaged by damp, some so brittle they might crumble if you breathe too hard. A place of forgotten thoughts and fragile truths. They give you a room, not a cell, with a window. You sleep for 2 days. When you wake, the hooded man is gone. But the scroll he gave you is still clutched in your hand like a lifeline. You open it, it's blank. At first you think it's a mistake. Then you understand. He wasn't giving you a message. He was giving you permission. So you write, slowly. Your fingers are stiff. Your grip is weak. But the words come, trickling like water from a cracked cistern. You don't write the polished speeches, you write the blood, the silence, the stone, the part where the wheel creaked just before it snapped your shoulder, the priest who took notes, the guard who looked away, the boy, always the boy. You don't call it a manifesto or a letter, you don't give it a title, it's just the truth. You don't know if anyone will read it. you don't care. Because writing it means it happened. That you happened. Not the version they carved into law, but the one that bled. You pause once to look outside. The river moves slow, relentless. It doesn't care who watches it. It just keeps going. You dip the quill again. And just when the pain in your hand feels unbearable, someone knocks. Not hard, not urgent, but the sound makes you flinch. You open the door. It's a child, not the boy, another, holding a scrap of parchment. He doesn't say anything. He just hands it to you. You unfold it. It's a line you wrote, badly copied, clumsily spelled, but unmistakably yours. And beneath it, 2 words. Tell more. You stare at the crooked letters until they blur, not from tears your eyes dried out 2 days ago, but from something else. A recognition that slices deeper than the wheel ever did. Your voice didn't die in the arena. It escaped. This boy isn't the same as the one who fled with your parchment, but the ripple is unmistakable. A tremor in the foundation of Rome's silence. Something is moving, and it's using your words as kindling. You invite him in. He doesn't sit. He just watches, wide-eyed, half curious, half reverent, like he's standing in the temple of a half-broken god who might still cough fire. You hand him a quill. Let him feel the weight. The tip is stained with your dried blood. He doesn't flinch. You ask, "What do you want to know?" He shrugs. "Everything." So you begin again. You tell him not just the horrors, but the absurdities. The guard who practiced poetry while beating prisoners. The senator who debated ethics while watching entrails hit the sand. The man who apologized to you for nailing your hand to a beam crookedly, then corrected it mid-scream. The boy doesn't laugh, he doesn't cry, he listens, as if each detail builds a shape in his mind, not of you, but of Rome itself. The true Rome. The Rome beneath the togas and triumphs. The Rome that blisters. He visits again, then again. He brings others. At first 1 or 2, then 5, 10. Young, old, limping, ragged. Some speak, some don't, but all of them watch. And that, you realise, is how rebellion begins. Not with torches, but with eyes that refuse to blink. And just when you begin to feel useful again, the librarian intervenes. She enters your chamber silently one night. She places her hand on your scrolls, gently, but there's steel beneath her fingers. "Be careful," she says, "you don't understand." They're listening. She means Rome, not the city, the idea. You ask, "Why let me write, then?" She sighs. "Because history has to be preserved. But some truths must be folded, not shouted." She shows you one of your pages, rewritten, censored, softened, the boy's name removed. The woman in the bull made anonymous, the screams reduced to spiritual resistance. It's not just survival they're polishing now, it's legacy. You feel the heat in your skull again, that old itch behind your eyes. You remember what it was like to be gagged with your own philosophies. But something darker is coming, because that night, just past the 3rd watch, the cart returns. The same one. The same driver, empty this time. He waits in silence. You don't move, you don't ask. The librarian does. "Why?" he answers with a scroll, sealed, heavy with official wax. You open it. It's your own words, edited, cut into neat slices of virtue, repackaged for imperial approval. At the bottom, a signature you recognise. The woman. Still spinning her web, she wants you back. Not for punishment, for promotion. Advisor to the new educational programme, it reads. A living example of dignified resistance. You laugh. This time full-bodied. It hurts like flame licking your ribs, but you let it burn. Because they didn't erase you, they canonised you. Sanitised suffering. Glorified restraint. And the worst part, it might work. Because Rome doesn't kill martyrs, it markets them. But before you answer, before you rise or refuse or speak, the librarian whispers, "There's another way." And that whisper changes everything. "There's another way," she repeats, eyes darting to the open window, then to the cart still waiting like a hungry dog in the night. Her tone isn't dramatic, it's quiet, urgent, the kind of tone used by people who don't want to be remembered as heroes, just as useful. You ask what she means. She doesn't explain with words. She opens a drawer. Inside a scroll. Thick, unsealed, no wax, no stamp, raw handwritten ink, fast, reckless, bleeding at the edges. You scan the first lines. It's your writing. Except it's not. It's you, but unfiltered. The version of you that never bowed to editors or flinched before polished Latin. The you who bled sarcasm and bile and metaphors sharp enough to cut imperial throat. I made copies, she says, from your first pages, before the revisions, before the archiving. You whisper, why? Her answer comes without pause. Because you told the truth, and I needed to remember what that sounded like. It hits harder than any hammer, because in a world where survival meant silence and promotion came through obedience, remembering was rebellion. You open the scroll further. The bull, the boy, the blood. It's all there, real, unpolished. She leans in. You have a choice. Get back in the cart. Let them dress you in robes and pin medals on your mangled body. Let them parade your pain like it was performance art. Or, she nods toward the scroll, we vanish this. You blink. Vanish? She smiles. Distribute. Smugglers, disciples, dissenters with ink under their nails and anger in their lungs. They already exist. Underground networks. Silent scribes who trade forbidden words like contraband. You've heard rumours. Now you're being invited into the bloodstream. She says, we don't need a monument, we need a virus. You laugh, quietly, bitterly. Rome will kill anyone caught. Yes, she says, but not everyone will be caught, and some stories survive on ash. She opens a hidden panel in the floor, scrolls stacked like firewood. Not just yours, others, names you'd thought erased, lives that refuse deletion. And just when you think you're about to decide, the boy returns. The same boy who first brought you the crooked words. Tell more. He sees the open scroll, the raw version. He doesn't ask questions. He says, that's the one I copied from. The librarian nods. He's already part of the system. A child courier of forbidden memory. Your memory. You ask how many have read it. He holds up his fingers. All 10. Then he grins and adds a toe. You look back at the cart. You imagine the version of yourself seated beside some governor, sipping wine, reciting parables with all the bite filed off. The Empire's favourite broken bird. And then you look at the scroll in your hand, still stained from the day you wrote it while fevered, half-starved, half-mad, and entirely honest. You nod. The librarian acts fast. She takes the cart driver aside, pays him with silver and silence. He leaves without asking questions. She burns the imperial offer in her hearth, the smoke curling like incense made of betrayal. You spend the night rewriting, not editing, reaffirming. By sunrise, 3 new copies exist. The boy carries one beneath his tunic. You watch him disappear into the horizon like a smuggled truth. You're still in pain, still hunted, still wounded, but you're no longer alone. You're a contagion, and Rome has no vaccine for memory written in blood. The librarian says that phrase quietly, as if speaking it out loud might summon soldiers. But the boy hears it, and repeats it under his breath like a prayer. You don't correct him, let it spread, let it mutate in their mouths, let it become untraceable. The first scroll goes west, carried by a crippled man who used to carve theatre masks for the Senate. He used to paint idealised smiles over plaster death. Now he delivers your scream, raw and unsmoothed, wrapped in old playbills and tucked inside a hollowed-out laurel wreath. The second heads north. A woman who once performed pantomimes in public squares carries it under her skirt. She can't read, but she remembers rhythm. She recites your phrases like chants, like incantations. She says them to children in alleyways, adding flourishes, metaphors and fire. The third scroll stays hidden, buried beneath the archives, for the future, or for the moment when every other copy has been burned. You stay, for now. You still look like something half dead. The wheel twisted your bones into a question mark, but your words walk straighter than ever. They move through taverns, through back rooms of bathhouses, encoded fragments painted onto the walls, beside anti-tax slogans and dirty poetry. And just when you think you've been forgotten, they send another offer, a different official this time. Younger, smiling like a man who thinks he's in control. He brings wine and flattery. You're an institution, he says, a foundation of civic morality. You say nothing. He continues. Your words, they've outgrown you. They're being quoted in the Senate. He says this like it's a reward. He sets a contract down. Advisory position, full restoration. You'd live comfortably. And more importantly, you'd be protected. Protected. As if you're some ancient vase that needs dusting. You ask if they plan to edit again. He hesitates, then smiles wider. Of course, we want the essence of you, not the rough edges. You ask if they plan to stop the scrolls. He pauses. We'd prefer consolidation, meaning sterilization. You pour out the wine. He leaves angry. The librarian watches from the doorway. That was brave, she says. You correct her. That was necessary. Because the moment you accept their comfort, you become the story they've written, and your version, the one that limps, bleeds and defies, gets quietly shelved. More couriers come. They don't speak unless needed. Some don't look older than 13. Some are missing fingers, teeth, eyes. All of them carry pieces of you, not as scripture, but as resistance. And slowly, you begin to see what Rome feared all along. Not your ideas, but your influence. Ideas can be burned, but once they move, once they attach, they stop being owned. One night, a scroll returns. It's burned along the edges, half gone. But you recognize your own words under the soot. The courier is missing an ear. They tried, he says. You ask who? He answers with one word. Everyone. It's working. Not everywhere. Not loud. Not yet. But enough. Enough to make soldiers nervous when crowds grow quiet. Enough to make governors reassign school teachers who quote you too often. Enough to make Rome notice that its margins are whispering. And in those margins, a new phrase begins to appear, scratched into walls and whispered in marketplaces. Truth does not scream. It endures. You never wrote that. Not in any scroll. Someone made it up, and you let them. Because that too is survival. Letting others write the next chapter. Letting the myth twist away from your bones. And as you sit in that quiet archive, broken and whole, you know one thing. They wanted a martyr. You gave them a movement, not loud, not fast, not the kind that marches with banners or tears down statues in the forum. This movement creeps, it murmurs, it rides inside mouths that were once too scared to open, grows behind eyes once taught only to look down. It wears no symbol, bears no name, and that's why it's dangerous. Because you can't crucify a whisper. You start to hear stories. The librarian reads them aloud at night, beside a flickering lamp, her voice calm as a priestess whispering sacred spells. A baker in Ostia who refused to sell bread to a senator because truth does not scream. A teacher in Neapolis who changed his curriculum to include banned phrases, yours, disguised as quotes from Homer. Even a group of gladiators, half drunk and half dead, who scrawled a line from your scrolls in blood on the wall of their barracks before one of them was fed to a leopard. Not all pain is punishment. You never wrote that line, but it sounds like something you would have written if you'd had more time. The librarian begins archiving the imitations. She calls them echoes. They're wild, off rhythm. Some contradict each other. Some are cruder than you'd ever allow. Some, strangely, are more profound than anything you ever dared say. And yet, they're yours in spirit. Not because they're accurate, but because they resist. That's when the knock comes again. Not at the door, at the archive's perimeter. Boots, dozens. The librarian peeks out, expression hardening. It's a search, she says. Routine. Nothing in Rome is routine. You hide the real scrolls in the floor. The librarian scatters decoys. Mostly philosophical nonsense about riverbeds and civic duty. A few critiques of Greek wine. Nothing sharp, nothing seditious. The soldiers enter. Their leader is young. Clean armour, smug eyes. He doesn't look for evidence. He looks for fear. His hands glide across the spines of scrolls like a man fondling corpses. Then he sees you. Not a robe, not a crown, not even shoes. Just a bent man with ink-stained hands and half a voice. He doesn't recognize you. Good. He points to one of the scrolls. Is this you? You shake your head. He reads a line aloud. Let the lions teach ethics if the Senate cannot. He chuckles. Sounds dangerous. You shrug. Sounds stupid. He leaves it. He moves to the next one. Who is the cracked voice of the empire's conscience? You blink. A metaphor. Too many metaphors can be treason. Then Rome must be built on crime. The librarian coughs to drown your sarcasm. The officer frowns, but he doesn't press. He leaves a warning instead. The prefect of thoughts will visit soon. Clear out the garbage. He means erase the past, or they'll erase you. The moment they leave, the librarian breathes again. You don't, because something about that phrase, prefect of thought, it curdles your blood. Rome used to burn books. Now it's appointing them. You know what's coming. They won't just hunt your words. They'll rewrite them. Turn your resistance into rhetoric. Your agony into anecdote. Your movement into myth. And once that happens, the truth won't matter anymore. Because they won't need to silence you. They'll quote you. Which is worse, because death ends a voice, but misuse rewires it. Makes it say the opposite in your own cadence. You look to the scrolls in the floor. And you know, the next step isn't hiding. It's war, not of swords, of sentences. Because Rome doesn't fear swords. It makes them. It exports them like olives and entitlement. But words, real words, the kind that crawl into the back of someone's mind and start chewing, those are harder to track, harder to silence. And right now, yours are spreading like a plague with good penmanship. You begin writing faster, not more carefully, faster. Not because you're inspired, but because you're cornered. Each scroll feels like a breath before drowning. You no longer polish, you purge, every metaphor sharpened, every insult left intact. You are no longer a philosopher, you are a virus with syntax. The librarian stops suggesting edits. She just copies. The boy returns, older now, or maybe just harder. He carries a scar on his cheek and a dagger at his belt. He doesn't smile much, but he still remembers every word you've ever said. Recites your early lines like spells. You train him, not to write like you, to write better. You show him how to disguise rebellion as fable, how to sneak barbs into stories about farmers and frogs, how to slip sedition between syllables. He learns fast, he teaches others. Soon you are not the only author, you are a genre. And that's when Rome strikes back. They release a scroll, thick, gold-edged, sealed with imperial wax and dripping with arrogance. The collected wisdom of the philosopher. Your name is on it, except you didn't write it. You open it, hand trembling. Every word is you and not. Phrases you once whispered, while bleeding now placed beside imperial endorsements. Quotes you wrote in fury, now turned into affirmations of order, structure, and virtuous submission. Your pain has been gentrified. The line you scribbled in the dirt with your fingernail. Freedom is not gifted, it is remembered. Now reads, freedom is a privilege remembered through loyalty. You feel sick, you don't vomit, you write. A counter scroll, pure venom, no metaphor, no riddles, just a title. This is not my voice. The librarian begs you to soften it, to stay underground, to preserve your safety. But safety is for statues, and you were sculpted in agony. The boy smuggles the scroll west. It spreads fast. The people who knew your real words latch onto it like an antidote. The empire's collected wisdom becomes a joke. They start quoting it, ironically, reciting the imperial version of your words with sneers and laughter, right before they throw stones. Rome is furious, and just when it couldn't get more absurd, they put out a bounty, not for you, for authenticity. Anyone who can prove they have a true scroll, unedited, unapproved, gets arrested, interrogated, disappeared. Truth becomes criminal, but that only makes it more seductive. Your followers start forging scrolls, some real, some fake, some purely invented. It doesn't matter anymore. because the power isn't in accuracy, it's in intention. Your voice has become a cipher, a weapon, a rallying cry scribbled in latrines and scratched into clay pots. And meanwhile, you sit in your archive, now watched day and night. 2 guards, always armed, always bored, but you're not afraid, because your legacy is no longer yours to fear for. It belongs to the fire, to the boy with the dagger and the mouth full of stolen verses, to the baker quoting you over sour loaves, to the teacher writing you on chalkboards, daring Rome to erase her again. You are not just remembered, you are repeated, and in repetition you are reborn. But repetition comes with distortion. That's the new fear whispering in the corners of your room, where your name now echoes, like a hymn misquoted too many times. You once said, "Let no truth be made noble by forgetting its blood." Now you've heard that repeated in the streets as, "Suffer nobly, and they will remember you." It makes your bones itch, because you never meant to be worshipped, you meant to be understood. The guards watching you have changed. The new ones are quieter, smarter. They pretend not to listen as you mutter to yourself, but you see their eyes linger on your quill. You start writing decoys, fake scrolls full of flowery nonsense and metaphysical riddles. They eat it up like pigs at a poetry trough. One day, one of them, the younger, asks you, "Did you really say, Rome is a mirror that only shows you what it wants you to become?" You didn't. You wish you had. You nod. He grins like a schoolboy. "I have that carved on my belt." The empire just branded itself with its own critique. And that's when the real war begins. Not in scrolls, but in education. The prefect of thought, yes him, finally arrives. He wears no armour, no medals, just soft robes and a colder smile than any centurion you've ever faced. His sandals are silent, and he smells like myrrh and paperwork. He sits across from you, like an old friend. "It's time," he says, "to collaborate." You don't respond. He continues anyway. "Your voice has power. We respect that. Rome is not here to silence you. Rome wants to shape you." You raise an eyebrow. He lays a scroll between you. It's thick, glossy, official. The first page reads, "Moral education for the citizen of empire." Your name is in gold. He says, "We've chosen excerpts, gentle ones, aspirational. You've inspired a generation." You reply without blinking. "You've lobotomized a rebellion." He laughs softly. "No, we've curated wisdom." He explains the plan. "Children will learn your lessons in school. Officials will cite your philosophies during ceremonies. A statue of you will be placed in the central forum, seated, dignified, eyes raised, as if watching over Rome with benevolent disappointment. You ask one question: will the broken wheel be part of the sculpture?" His smile falters. "No, of course not. That part will be implied. Too graphic, too complicated, doesn't fit the message." You stand, slowly. Your joints protest, but you force your spine straighter than it's bent in years. You say, "If you clean my suffering, you rewrite the crime." The prefect doesn't flinch. Instead, he says, "And if you keep bleeding all over your followers, you turn them into zealots." He leaves the scroll behind. A trap, but also a test. That night, you burn it. The librarian says nothing. The boy, now taller, scarred, his eyes colder, sees the ash. He nods once, not in defiance, in understanding. Because now it's clear, Rome doesn't need to kill ideas. It needs to commodify them. And in doing so, it hopes to sedate them. You don't sleep that night. You rewrite your oldest scrolls, not to soften, to clarify, to shout. Your margins overflow with new ink. Angrier, cleaner, free of metaphor. You strip away every poetic cushion. You leave only knives. You write a new line. You do not sign it, but it spreads anyway. "I would rather be misquoted by rebels than quoted by tyrants." You didn't mean for it to spread. You scrawled it half out of rage, half out of despair, expecting it to disappear like most last lines written in a broken hand. But it bloomed. Fast, viral. Burned into wood outside temples, carved into bread ovens, inked onto the forearms of slaves. Rome noticed, but they didn't retaliate, not immediately. They studied it. They analysed the tone, the phrasing. They tried to find the original parchment. They couldn't, because there wasn't one. The scroll had been copied, recopied, quoted, altered, engraved in stone, and whispered into the wind. You are no longer an author, you are folklore, and folklore, Rome learns too late, is ungovernable. The prefect of thought returns. This time without robes, without scrolls, just a single question. What do you want? He says it like a man asking a god to name its price. You say nothing, because it's not about what you want anymore. It's about what you've become. He senses that. So he changes tactics. He speaks of riots. Apparently, a group of candle makers refused to pay temple taxes. Their leader quoted one of your lines, a fake one actually. Something about light belonging to the hands that burn. Not yours, but close enough to draw blood. 6 dead. Dozens flogged. He blames you. You don't flinch. He moves closer. You're creating monsters. You finally speak. No, you created them. I just taught them to howl. He doesn't smile this time. Then perhaps it's time, he says. We stopped calling you a philosopher. He leaves. 2 nights later, the archive is searched again. No soldiers this time. Priests. Men with shaved heads and clean fingernails. They chant as they walk. They call your writings unbalanced, inflamed. Morally destabilizing. They don't burn the scrolls. They anoint them. With oil. Then declare them unclean. A different kind of execution. The librarian watches them from the shadows. She doesn't cry. She sharpens knives. You think about how this all began. A boy, a wheel, a scream, a silence, a decision not to let it end in silence. And now, that decision has a body count. You wonder, not for the first time, whether clarity just breeds corpses. But then the boy returns, older now, voice deeper, shoulders broader, his cloak stitched with patches, each from a different scroll keeper, a different city. He says one sentence. They're calling you the broken flame. You laugh, dry, hollow, bitter, because it's ridiculous, because you never asked for worship, because Rome wanted a puppet and your people want a prophet, and somewhere in between, the truth got lost in the applause and the executions. But the boy isn't done. They've started forming circles, he says, reciting scrolls, teaching others, smuggling more than just words now. You ask what else? Salt, bread, tools, names, real resistance. He hands you a list. You recognize half the names. Disciples, former scribes, old speakers from the capital, even the baker from Ostia. They've built a network. They're planning something. You ask when? He says, soon. You don't give orders. You don't need to, because your words already did. And just when the room falls quiet again, a child arrives, 7, maybe 8, missing a tooth, holding a tiny scrap of leather. She says nothing. She hands it to the librarian. It's not a scroll, it's a sliver of cloth. Burned at the edges, on it scratched with coal. Fire doesn't ask permission. You never wrote that either, but it feels like you. And for the first time in weeks, you feel something dangerous stir in your chest. Not hope, not pride, just inevitability. Because revolutions don't bloom. They rot first. They swell and stink and blister through the cracks of decaying order. And Rome, for all its aqueducts and opulence, has started to smell. The prefect visits one last time. No robes, no scrolls, no guards, just him. And a knife, not drawn, not threatened, simply present. He lays it on the table between you like a question you're supposed to answer with your throat. He says, do you know what they're chanting now? You do, but you let him speak. Fire doesn't ask permission. That wasn't even yours. You nod, which makes it even more powerful. He doesn't flinch. It makes it uncontrollable. He stares at the knife like he's trying to convince himself to use it, but he won't. Not here, not yet. Instead, he whispers, they're blaming you for the temple burning in Tiber, for the uprising in the mines near Tarracina, for the defacing of the Empress's statue in the Forum. You shrug. Wasn't me. But it's your voice, he growls. Even when it's not your words. He leans closer. How does it feel to be a weapon wielded by ghosts? You look him dead in the eyes and say, better than being armor for cowards. He stands abruptly, but he doesn't take the knife. He leaves it. And something in you understands. That wasn't intimidation. It was invitation. A final offer. You could end this. Take the blade. Write your last scroll in your own blood. Be a martyr. A neat ending. Rome could live with that, but you don't. Because endings are for epics. This is infection. Later that night, the librarian speaks in hushed tones. They're planning a march from the salt roads to the capital. Caravans, scrolls pinned to banners, children reciting your words like hymns. You say nothing, because the moment you speak it becomes a command. And this must never be a command. That's the irony, isn't it? You, the one they tried to silence, now can't speak too loudly, or you might incite something Rome can't smother. The boy returns. He looks haunted, dirt under his nails, blood on his hem. He says, "They caught one of ours." He doesn't say what Rome did to them. He doesn't have to. The air smells of singed parchment and flesh memory. You sit beside him in the dark and teach him one last lesson. You can't fight an empire with vengeance, he asks. Then what? Memory, you say. But not mine, yours, he blinks. But I'm not a philosopher. No, you reply, you're worse. He laughs. It's a dry, broken thing, but it's real. Then he opens his satchel and spills out the future. New scrolls, not copies, new. Different ink, different handwriting, different anger. One quotes a rebel baker, something about how salt makes every wound honest. Another recounts the time a girl spit in a centurion's face and quoted a line she thought was yours, even though you'd never use the word toadstool so aggressively. None of them are yours, and yet all of them are. That's the moment you understand. You are no longer the flame. You are the ash it left behind, still hot, still smouldering, still able to burn if touched the wrong way. And somewhere out there, someone, a girl, a slave, a soldier too tired to kneel, is whispering something you never said but meant. And Rome is listening, but not the way it used to. Not like gods listening to prayers, noses high in marble clouds. Rome listens now, like a beast caught in a collapsing maze, panting, twitching, trying to smell the fire before it finds the next wall. The librarian brings you word. The prefect is missing. Vanished. Some say assassinated, others say exiled. A few whisper that he defected, fled south, took a scroll with him, and disappeared into the salt mines, mumbling verses you never wrote. It doesn't matter, because what mattered was his position, and that chair, the prefect of thought's throne, is now empty. Rome doesn't like empty chairs. They fill it fast. The new appointee is different, younger, prettier, charismatic the way snakes are charismatic. He wears bright robes and speaks in modern rhetoric. They call him the curator. He doesn't threaten you. He flatters you. He invites you to a public forum, a dialogue of progress. He offers amnesty, stage time, a cleaned-up audience, and a promise that no soldier will touch you. The librarian laughs until she chokes. You say nothing, Gay, because the curator isn't trying to kill you. He's trying to clothe you, to dress your voice in silk and feed it to the people, like dessert. To say, look how wise our dissidents are, how safely they vent. Aren't we generous? The boy, no, the man now, suggests another path. Let him have his forum, he says. We'll give him his dialogue. You raise a brow. He grins. And that's how it begins. The most dangerous thing you ever do is say yes to the wrong invitation. The curator announces the event with pomp and platitude. The philosopher returns, a night of reflection and renewal. Posters bloom like fungus. Streets are scrubbed. Scrolls are handed out, stamped with gold. Their contents sterilized for public taste. But the real plan moves in silence. Your people prepare. Not with swords, with scripting. At night, across the city, they rehearse verses that never made it past Rome's editors. Phrases too sharp for school, too bitter for statues. They write new ones. Some of them don't even pretend to be you anymore. They write as themselves. Bakers, midwives, runaway slaves. One man simply writes, "I lived. That was my resistance. You keep a copy." The night arrives. You are wheeled onto the stage, bones cracking, wrapped in nothing grand. The curator is beside you, beaming, a snake with a halo. He begins with pleasantries. "How does it feel," he purrs, "to finally be welcomed home?" You smile, just once, and then you speak the line that wasn't yours, but was everyone's. Fire doesn't ask permission. The crowd erupts. Not in cheers, in recitation. They don't let you finish, because they already know what comes next. They shout your phrases, misquotes, mockeries, originals, parodies, all of it. The curator tries to talk over them. Fails. Someone lights a scroll on fire. A child dances with it like a torch. No violence, no attacks, just eruption. Rome had wanted to showcase your silence. Instead, it got an orchestra. The next day, the curator disappears. Officially, reassigned. Unofficially, swallowed by the thing he tried to curate. And you're escorted back to your cell. No celebration, just your cracked hands and a dry smile. Because that was never about you speaking. It was about showing them you no longer had to. That was the first real victory. Not the applause, not the fire, not even the retreat of Rome's rhetorical priesthood. It was the silence that followed. The kind that isn't empty, but pregnant, with risk, with clarity, with momentum. But something darker was coming. Not retaliation, containment. Rome doesn't always crush what it fears. Sometimes it hugs it to death. And so, weeks after the forum, they announce a new institution. The Sanctuary of Civic Voice. It's a school, they claim, a place where the next generation of thoughtful dissenters can learn to question properly, to critique with measured discipline, to engage responsibly. It's a cage with a marble floor, and they name you as its patron without asking. They erect a statue, bronze, seated, dignified, mouth slightly open, as if always about to speak, but never quite finishing the sentence. It's poetic, they say. He listens more than he lectures. The boy sees it first. He doesn't laugh. He spits. The librarian scrapes together what scrolls remain. They're rewriting you faster than we can remember you, she warns. You nod, because you know this isn't about censorship anymore. It's assimilation. They want your legacy, not as weapon, but wallpaper. That's when the letters start arriving. Handwritten, shaky, from miners, fishmongers, midwives. All say the same thing, in different tongues. They've started taking the children, not to prison, to the sanctuary, by force. Rome says it's education. You know it's reformatting. They're teaching kids that your ideas were endorsed by the empire, that your suffering was a necessary evolution in Roman philosophy. That obedience is the final stage of understanding. You nearly vomit when you hear it, and just when it couldn't get more grotesque, you receive a scroll. From a girl in Brundisium. Her brother disappeared. 3 days later, his voice returned, quoting your lines, eyes blank, words polished, cadence perfect. He speaks like you, she writes, but he looks through us. You feel something rupture in your chest, because they've found the one thing more powerful than killing your voice, imitating it. That night, you call the boy, the man, the leader. You tell him the next step is not poetry, it's exposure. You must make Rome show its teeth. Force the lion to roar, you say, so people stop mistaking it for a statue. He nods. Plans begin. Not of revolt, not yet, of revelation. They start recording testimonies, in secret. Voices of the stolen, children who escaped the sanctuary, teachers who refused the curriculum, scroll keepers who saw the original texts burned and rewritten under the moonlight. They call it the unscroll. Not bound, not stored, not archived, spoken, passed mouth to mouth like a curse and a cure, whispered in alleyways, sung in markets. One boy chants it in the forum, gets dragged off, doesn't scream. He knew the risk, because now it's not about living, it's about witnessing. And you sit in your little room, surrounded by guards who don't know what to believe anymore. Half of them quote you at lunch. The other half pray they never get assigned to the sanctuary. You write again. One last scroll. No riddles, no metaphors, no forgiveness. Just this. They can borrow my voice, but they cannot borrow my scars. You don't sign it. You don't have to. But that wasn't even the worst part, because someone inside your circle, one of the old scribes, a face you once trusted with draft scrolls and whispered revisions, defects, not to Rome, to curation, he begins writing in your name. Not satire, not parody, continuation. He claims to be channeling your final teachings. He publishes lost scrolls. Scrolls you never wrote, phrases you never uttered. But they're good. Frustratingly so. Witty, poetic, almost plausible. Worse, they sell. Rome welcomes it. Of course, it costs them nothing. One less rebel to kill. They frame it as your evolution. The philosopher's maturity. And just like that, the flame is split. Half your followers call it heresy. The other half aren't sure. Because the new scrolls sound like you. They soothe. They promise hope. They gently criticize without accusation. They speak of healing, of reconciliation. It's everything you tried to avoid. Comfortable lies wrapped in the skin of your pain. The man, your boy, grown and tired, comes to you, scroll in hand. Should I kill him? He asks. You look up. No, you say. He's already dead. He doesn't understand, but you do. Because worse than betrayal is reinvention. The scribe isn't stealing your legacy. He's embalming it, draining it of blood and wrapping it in linen, making it safe for libraries. You go quiet for days, not because you're afraid, because you're calculating. The librarian suggests a counter-scroll. You refuse. This isn't about rebuttal. This is about disruption. So you do something you haven't done in years. You walk. You gather your bones and your bile and your broken gate, and you walk out of the archive under the indifferent gaze of guards who think your spine's too bent to matter. You go to the streets, alone, and you speak, not on scroll, not on stage, just your voice, hoarse and raw in the middle of the forum, as children play and merchants bicker. And you say one sentence, he quotes my hope, but forgets my pain. People stop. They recognize the cadence. Then the guards arrive. They don't strike you. They escort you, like a relic, like a risk, back to your archive, where you find it ransacked, not by Rome, by devotees. Your original scrolls, stolen, replaced with the new ones. The fake ones, tidy, glossy, safe. You collapse into a chair made of rot. The man kneels beside you. What now? You stare at the remaining blank parchment and say, now we remind them why they were afraid of me. Because your enemy is no longer Rome. It's interpretation. It's the idea that your agony can be marketed. So you don't write a scroll. You write a curse. A list of names, not of emperors, but of grocers who burned your words for warmth. Of midwives who recited your lines between contractions. Of prisoners who used your voice to whisper across chains. You tell their stories, one per line. No commentary, just truth. Ugly, lopsided, real. You release it anonymously. It spreads like infection. The fake scribe tries to discredit it, fails. Because you never claimed authorship. And in that silence, they hear something more genuine than any signature. And just when it couldn't get more absurd, the Empire bans the curse, not because of what it says, because of how it says it. No moral structure, the curator claims. Too raw. You smile in the dark. Because that was always the point, not to inspire, to infect. But you weren't prepared for how far the infection would spread. Because curses, it turns out, breed mutations. And soon, there are versions of your voice you no longer recognize. Copies of your message stripped of ethics, bloated with vengeance. New groups form, not philosophers, not rebels, fanatics. They take your rejection of empire and turn it into scripture. Not reflection, obsession. They burn statues indiscriminately. Not just emperors, poets, elders, even doctors who once treated slaves with kindness. They chant your lines out of context. He quotes my hope, but forgets my pain, while flogging a merchant accused of selling imperial bread. The man, your once boy, brings you the reports. He looks more tired than ever. They're using your face, he says, on banners, with knives crossed beneath. You ask, do they even read? He doesn't answer. Because you already know. They don't want philosophy. They want permission. That night, a young woman arrives at your door, barely 20, bright eyes, scarred hands, voice trembling with pride. She recites one of your earliest scrolls, flawlessly. Then she tells you how she led a raid, burned a warehouse, cut a tax official's throat. He was quoting the fake you, she says. You ask, did he fight back? She hesitates. No, she whispers. He begged. You feel your stomach twist, but you don't show it. Instead, you ask, and you're proud? She nods. You gave us clarity. You reply, slow, every syllable a blade. Clarity without mercy is just cruelty in disguise. She doesn't understand. She leaves confused, not shaken, just inconvenienced. You realize then, you're not a prophet, you're a source code, and they're rewriting you in real time. The librarian offers a solution. We take your name off everything. Disown the movement. Let it die or evolve without your ghost haunting it. The man agrees. You've done enough. Let it burn. But you can't. Because letting it burn doesn't extinguish the flame. It just blinds people faster. So you write again, not a scroll, a confession. You title it, Errors in Transmission. It begins with this, I am not your saviour. I am your mistake, repeated until it became familiar. You list the names of the dead, all of them, imperial and rebel alike. No justifications, no eulogies, just cause and effect. You write about the boy on the wheel, but you also write about the girl who killed a baker for quoting the wrong sentence. You describe your prison, but you also describe the comfort of being misquoted. How flattering it is, how dangerously flattering. You describe the warmth of being worshipped, then the rot that follows. You release it quietly. No signature, but the voice is unmistakable. The reception is nuclear. Half your followers renounce the movement. The other half accuse the scroll of being another forgery. Debates erupt, scrolls are thrown. Teachers flee cities, fires start, not in protest, but in argument. Rome smiles, because confusion is easier to manage than rebellion. And just when it couldn't get more absurd, the sanctuary announces it will begin teaching errors in transmission as part of its curriculum. As a cautionary tale, a moral tragedy, they call it the final scroll of the philosopher. You laugh so hard you collapse. Because of course Rome takes your regret and turns it into policy. Because even your doubt has value now. Even your guilt is profitable. And as you lie there gasping, the man kneels beside you again. Was it worth it? You don't answer. Because that's not a question you're allowed to answer anymore. Because now, your answer becomes doctrine. Even hesitation becomes ideology. You've become the world's most exhausted god, worshipped, misquoted, and blamed in equal measure. You cough and someone carves the sound into a moral code. You blink and they burn a temple. The librarian starts locking the archive at night, not to keep Rome out, to keep your believers out. Because now they break in to steal words. Yours, not yours, almost yours. Anything they can stitch into banners or tattoo on their wrists. One boy carves a line from your errors in transmission into his arm and sets himself on fire in front of the sanctuary gates. He dies with a smile. Rome prints a coin in his honour. You are nowhere on it. But the quote is, worse, it's paraphrased. You're losing your grip on the story, not because you're dying, but because you've been outlived by your replicas. Every market has a counterfeit now. Every whisper has a sibling made of soot and syllables. The man brings grim news. There's a splinter faction, he says. They call themselves the Ashes. You wince. They believe you're a construct, a metaphor, that you never existed. That all your scrolls were written by a collective of dissidents over time. You ask, and? He shrugs. It's working. They've gained traction. They've staged a funeral for you. A real one. Built a coffin. Wrote a eulogy. Burned an effigy made of blank scrolls and old bones. Children wept. a death cult for a living myth. You say, "What happens when I die for real?" He says, "Nothing." And that somehow is the most terrifying answer of all. So you write again, out of spite, out of defiance, not for the masses, for the few. You write to the ones who knew you before the distortion, before the curation, before the sanctuaries and imposters and martyr factories. You write to remind them you were once small. You write about hunger, real hunger, not poetic longing, the kind where your ribs rattle when you laugh, the kind that makes you think about biting wood, the kind you shared with a prisoner named Nasso, whose only crime was being born when grain was short. You write about the time you begged a guard for water, and he poured it on the floor and told you to drink from the mud. You did, and it tasted like every truth you'd ever try to write afterward. You write that down too, and then you burn it, because this one is just for you. Not for memory, not for legacy, just to feel like your words still belong to you. The librarian finds the ashes and nods. She understands, she always did. Then she gives you a final scroll, written not by you, not by the man, by her. It's titled, "The Cost of Echoes." It begins, "We turned a scream into a symphony, and now we're choking on the melody." You read it slowly. It's raw, honest, cruel in places. It says what you couldn't, that maybe the worst part of surviving execution isn't the pain, or the scars, or the exile. It's being remembered by people who don't know what they're remembering, and just when you think it can't cut deeper. She writes, "We didn't preserve you, we petrified you." You sit with that. All night, no ink, no rebuttal, just the weight of a truth too sharp to hold without bleeding. Because now, even your silence needs footnotes. And still, that wasn't the end. Because Rome, ever theatrical, doesn't just forget its enemies. It recasts them. Word arrives of a new play, a tragedy, funded by the state, written by a playwright whose only rebellion was drinking wine during daylight. It's called The Last Scroll. You are the main character, but not you. Not the one who starved in a cell and watched friends die unnamed. Their version is elegant, well-fed, merciful. You debate kindly. Forgive easily. When tortured, you smile. When exiled, you compose poetry about sunsets and civic unity. You die with a nod. Rome weeps, and then goes home comforted. The man brings the script, doesn't say a word, just drops it at your feet. You open it. Read one line, then set it on fire. "Too gentle," you say. The librarian chuckles bitterly. That's the point, because if they can make you kind, they can make the empire the villain turned victim. It's revisionist mercy, guilt laundered through fiction. A former student visits you. She's shaken. She attended the play, applauded it, thought it was beautiful. Then she saw a beggar quoting one of your actual lines in the street. Guards beat him senseless. She wept, not for the beggar, for herself, because for a moment she had believed the play more than the blood. You tell her, that's what they count on. She asks, "What do I do now?" You whisper, "Start remembering without permission," and that becomes your final campaign. Not a rebellion, a memory war. You write fragments, short ones, no complete thoughts, just pain pinned to parchment like insects. A scream interrupted, a lash counted in whisper, the smell of iron when your wrists cracked. You distribute them with no name, no context. Some end up in sewers, others in libraries. A few are recopied by children who think they're riddles. You don't care. Because not every truth needs to be legible. Some just need to rot slowly into the walls. Then the man returns, breathing heavier than usual. "There's word from the east," he says. "A general used your scroll to justify a mutiny." You close your eyes, he adds. "They lost. Executions. Hundreds." Then silence. He asks, "Do you want to hear the names?" You shake your head. Not out of cruelty, out of exhaustion. Because what do names matter now? They're footnotes to your myth. You're not a man anymore. You're a movement-shaped corpse. And the most dangerous part? You're still alive. And just when it couldn't get more grotesque, a delegation arrives. Official robes, ink-stained hands, they ask for a final interview. Before your health fails, they add, smiling. They want to archive your words properly. They promise preservation, integrity, immortality. You ask, will you censor me? They smile wider. No, we'll polish you. You laugh in their faces. Because Rome never silences, it sanitizes. They leave disappointed. Not because you refused, because you didn't beg. That night, the librarian brings you tea. There's a pause. She says, do you regret it? You sip, swallow, answer without blinking. No, and she believes you, but she doesn't smile, because regret isn't the question. Recognition is. You still remember every scream, every broken rib, every word that came back to you wearing the wrong shoes. You don't regret them, but you see them. And that's worse, because the truth isn't what gets remembered. It's what gets repeated with enough confidence to be believed. And right now, confidence wears your skin. So you do the only thing left. You keep whispering. To no one. To everyone. In a voice too hoarse to echo and too soft to sell. Because even the softest voice can rot an empire, if you whisper long enough into the cracks. And Rome is cracking, but not where you'd hoped, not in the marble senate, not in the golden statues. It's the alleys, the gutters. That's where the real collapse starts. A girl with scabbed knuckles and a burned scroll stitched into her cloak stops a magistrate mid-sentence. She quotes one of your lines. He slaps her. She grins. He dies 2 weeks later in a riot. No one confesses, no one mourns. Because now, your name is both mask and weapon. A baker is arrested for having a quote carved on his oven door. The quote, bread is freedom disguised as silence. The guards don't understand it. That doesn't stop the beating. Children chant it in the streets. They don't even know what it means, but they know it hurts someone. That's enough. You find yourself torn. Part of you rejoices, the infection is working. But another part watches the riots, hears the slogans and wonders, was the sickness ever in the empire, or was it always in the echo? The man returns, older now, rougher. He doesn't kneel anymore, just sits. We're planning a strike, he says. Real disruption, markets, granaries. We'll cite your fifth scroll, the one on economic chokeholds. You nod. He pauses. You okay with that? You stare and ask, would it matter if I wasn't? He doesn't answer. That is the answer. You tell him, then stop asking permission and start taking responsibility. He doesn't like it, but he nods, because even monsters born of philosophy still crave their creator's blessing. Later, a child sneaks into your quarters. He's maybe 10. Grubby fingers, big eyes, scroll fragment clenched like a talisman. He says nothing, just holds it out. It's one of yours, one you forgot writing. If the tongue fails, let the bruise speak, he says. My brother said this when they cut out his tongue. You look down. He adds, then he set fire to the registrar's office. You ask, did he survive? The boy shrugs. His name's everywhere now. You tell him gently. That's not the same thing. He says, I know, but it's enough. Then he leaves, without asking for more words. You sit with that for a long time, because they don't want philosophy anymore. They want ashes that taste like revenge. The librarian returns the next morning. She's been followed. She's bleeding from the lip. She says, they think I forged your last scroll. You ask, which one? She laughs bitterly. All of them. You help her clean the blood. She's shaking, but not from fear, from rage. They're turning you into religion, she spits. Soon there'll be holy days, rituals, wars. Your name will be carved into the sky and pissed into the earth, and no one will remember the part where you begged for water and got mud. You nod, because you remember. And just when it couldn't get more bitter, a senator declares a national holiday in your name, not for your birth, for your execution date, even though you're not dead. They call it Liberation Day. There are parades, there are prayers, there are children wearing paper masks of your face. You don't attend. Of course not. But you hear it from your cell. The chanting, the flutes, the slogans. And beneath it all, your voice, warped, warbled, echoed in 1,000 wrong frequencies. You whisper one last time, just for yourself. A voice can be stolen, but a bruise never lies, and it almost sounds like goodbye. It only allows rewrites. The next scroll arrives anonymously, titled The Final Hours of the Philosopher. You didn't write it, but they say you did. It describes you gently dying in a bed of lilies, murmuring about peace and civic harmony, surrounded by followers who weep and vow to love the empire harder. You read it, then vomit into a basin. It's not even the lies that get you, it's the intent. Because this is beyond erasure. This is taxidermy. They've killed your defiance and stuffed your skin with compliance. Even the librarian can't hold it in. She burns a copy in front of the city gate, screaming, "He's not your bedtime story." She gets arrested. You try to intervene. Too late. They sentence her to the sanctuary, the same place that once quoted your pain. Now it absorbs your defenders. She doesn't scream. She doesn't even look back. Just mouths the sentence you know by heart. I'd rather be erased than edited. You don't cry. Not because you're brave, because you ran out of salt years ago. The man, still loyal, still weathered, offers one last plan. A real revolt, not a scroll, not a riot, a full breach of the sanctuary. Expose everything. The children, the conditioning, the doctrine forged from your mangled words. You stare at him. You'll die, you say. He nods, but this time not quietly. It happens on the eve of your name day, the festival of liberation. While Rome throws parades with masks of your face, the man and 20 others storm the sanctuary. They don't make it past the second gate, but they get one scroll out, one single blood-stained fragment. It lists names of those re-educated under your doctrine, children turned into mimics, their voices trained to speak in your rhythm, their gestures sculpted from your body language. One girl, age 7, described as a perfect recital of pain and reconciliation. You read it aloud, alone, and then tear it into pieces, because you never reconciled anything, and just when it couldn't get more obscene, Rome issues a decree. The philosopher's method, now part of the imperial curriculum. Not for rebels, for bureaucrats. They teach your techniques in diplomacy, negotiation, even taxation. Your defiance is now customer service training. You are officially state property. And somehow the worst part, it's working. Crime drops. Disputes de-escalate. Children cite you in essays about civic duty. They call it the age of reasoned empire. You are now the mascot of a machine that once chewed your ribs into soup. And you sit in your cell, which they now call a study, because prisoners can't be heroes, and watch pigeons fight on the sill. A boy walks past your door. He's humming a tune, a lullaby based on your first scroll. It's catchy. You hate how catchy it is. You ask him, "Do you know who wrote that?" He shrugs. No one. It's just always been there. And that's when the real death happens. Not when your scrolls are burned, not when your friends are jailed, not when your face is stamped onto coins and mugs and schoolbooks. The real death is when they forget you were ever alive, when they call your scream a nursery rhyme, when your agony becomes ambient. You lie back, bones creaking, not with pain, with prophecy. Because this was always the last execution, not of your body, of your meaning. And you're just the ghost who had the courtesy to stick around and watch. But that wasn't even the worst part, because Rome, being Rome, doesn't just exploit you in life. It denies you death. You wake one morning to find a new decree nailed to your door. The philosopher is immortal. Not metaphorically, legally. They've declared you an eternal citizen of the empire. You cannot die, not in public record, not in ritual, not even in literature. From this moment on, you exist forever. You are a utility, a philosophical infrastructure. No one can write your death, no one can bury you, no one can mention your absence. You are now required, by imperial edict, to exist at all times. Presence shall be maintained in ceremonial and administrative functions, it reads. They've assigned scribes to mimic your voice, statues that nod during speeches, scrolls ghost-written to reflect your ongoing development. They've built a wax figure of you for festivals. It drools. One child asks if you're a god. A priest replies, he's something better. He's a concept. And just like that, you're no longer a man who survived the wheel. You're a walking syllabus, a curriculum wrapped in parchment and politics. The man, your oldest friend, now stooped and pale, sneaks in that night. "Congratulations," he mutters, voice dry. "You're officially more valuable dead than alive, so they've made sure you'll never be either." You don't respond. Because what is there to say? You thought the executions were over. But this is the final scaffold, eternal relevance. Your pain has been franchised, licensed, sold. Your dissent, once dangerous, now decorates diplomatic banquets. A senator recites your scroll on mercy between sips of imported wine and laughs. You receive invitations to speak from people who know you're not speaking. They pretend you're responding. A whole new genre is born, interpretive dialogues with the philosopher. You become the Socrates of tourism brochures. Even your wounds have roles now. One scroll details the ritual significance of your fractured femur. Another calls your missing teeth metaphors for imperial resilience. They've turned your molars into allegory. You didn't even get to keep your decay, and just when you think there's nothing left to hollow, they rename your prison. It's now the philosopher's house. Tours available twice daily. Children leave drawings. One reads, "Thank you for helping Rome be gentle." You almost laugh. Instead, you cough, hard. Something wet comes up. The man notices. "You're sick," he says. You nod. Finally. The body remembers. You're dying, but you're not allowed to. He panics. "I can sneak you out. Take you to the hills. You can pass quietly. Somewhere real." You smile. "Rome would dig me up." He doesn't argue. Because he knows. They won't let you go. They'll embalm your corpse in politics and drag your name across another century. They'll say your silence was symbolic. They'll call your rotting a metaphor for civic transition. Even your decomposition will require footnotes. So instead of fleeing, you request a scroll. You write, "I was not meant to live this long. If I am still here, it is not by will, but by theft." You leave no signature, but the voice is unmistakable. It spreads. Again. Rome declares it a forgery. Again. But this time, something different happens. Someone else writes a reply, then another, and another. Not quotes, not copies, but actual replies. Some angry, some grieving, some confused. One just says, "I miss the version of you that could be hurt." And suddenly, for the first time in decades, you feel something unfamiliar. A sliver of being seen. Not revered, not enshrined, just recognized. But something darker was coming. Because immortality, it turns out, was just the prelude. Now they want your afterlife. The new decree is insidious. The philosopher ascends. It's a celestial promotion. You're no longer merely immortal in Rome. You've been elevated to divine abstraction. You are now an ethereal principle, a cosmic mascot for thought aligned with empire. They build temples, tiny portable ones, market stalls with incense, candles shaped like your face. Your words are now psalms, misquoted and branded into prayer beads sold near the Senate. One politician suggests rewriting the calendar to count years from your execution. The idea gains traction. A new time, a new mythos. And yet, you're still here, still breathing, barely. Your lungs rattle, your gums bleed, but your divinity doesn't allow for symptoms. They've issued a medical edict. The philosopher is in eternal good health. So when you cough blood, the scribes call it symbolic ink. When you faint, they say, "He bowed in contemplation." And when you scream, because yes, you scream now, they call it a thunder of wisdom. You become the only god who prays to die. The man visits, whisper thin, hands trembling. He brings a vial, dark liquid, illegal. You drink this and you stop being a story. You ask, "Do I stop being useful?" He nods. You stop being owned. It's tempting, but you don't take it. Not yet. Because something has shifted. The children? They're not chanting your name anymore. They're questioning it. Why did he let them twist his words? Was he ever real? Is suffering always sacred? Your myth is cracking from the inside. And that crack, it smells like truth. You start leaving notes, not scrolls, not doctrine, just fragments, scrawled in corners, scratched into stone, buried beneath benches and scribbled behind statues. Lines like, "There is no purity in worship, only escape in memory." If a god can't bleed, he was never a man. They start showing up on walls, in alleys, on banners at protests. Some say they're fakes, some say they're sacred. You don't correct them, you can't. You've become allergic to clarity. Then one night, a new face appears in your chamber. A young girl, 12 maybe, eyes like cracked amber. She holds something tight in her hand. It's your earliest scroll, the one you wrote when they still called you criminal, not doctrine. She whispers, "My brother died for reading this." You nod. She asks, "Was it worth it?" You open your mouth, then close it, because for the first time, you don't know what would help her more, the truth or the lie that still makes her stand. So you say gently, "I hope he thought so." She blinks, then nods once firmly, and leaves. No ceremony, no candles, just footsteps, soft and certain. You stare at the empty space she leaves behind, and realise she didn't want your wisdom. She wanted your permission to keep surviving, even if survival tastes like ash. The man returns the next morning. This time, no vial, just a quiet whisper. It's happening. They've called a council. They want to vote on enshrining your entire life into scripture. Make it law. You laugh, then choke, then cough until you bleed. But the laugh stays. Because of course, Rome can't let you rot. It has to gild your corpse in legislation. The man kneels, for the first time in years, not in reverence, in grief. He says, "Say the word and I'll stop it." You say nothing. You just look at your hands, trembling, thin, but still yours. And for a moment, just a moment, you remember the wheel, the scream, the crack of bone, the blood, and the fact that back then, no one wanted to own you. They just wanted you gone. And somehow that felt more honest than being made eternal. But honesty, like rot, rarely makes it into scripture. The council convenes in a marble hall, built with taxes and prayers. They wear your symbol, recite your teachings, debate your divinity over imported olives. Outside, a boy pisses on your statue. Inside, a senator weeps while quoting your fifth scroll backwards. And you're in a cot that used to be a prison, then a shrine, now a hospice, depending on who's writing. The man sits beside you. He says, "It's done. They voted. You're now a sacred principle, not a person." You ask, "Was it unanimous?" He chuckles. "No. One abstained. Said you never asked for this." You whisper, "He's wrong." Then pause and add, "I begged them not to, and now it's too late. They've already etched your final sayings onto the walls of the Temple of Reflection. Sayings you never said. One of them reads, 'Even suffering, once blessed, becomes a gift.' You vomit blood when you hear it, but only a little. You're mostly dry now." The librarian, gaunt but free, sneaks in that night. She brings a bag. Inside, the original scrolls, smuggled out before the temple was built. Your real words, not cleaned, not copied. The ones with blood stains and burn marks and tears that smudged ink. You touch one. It shakes in your hand. Because for the first time in decades, you remember the pain that made it. The teeth-gritted scratches you etched after watching a friend hang upside down for 12 hours before dying. The sentence you wrote the morning they threatened to kill your mother if you didn't recant. The line you added at midnight after a dream of silence so loud it made your ears bleed. She asks, "What do we do with them?" You say, "Let them rot." She stares. You clarify. Not destroyed, just buried. Somewhere damp and forgotten. Let time chew on them. The man doesn't object. He just adds, "Maybe one day someone will find them. And know you weren't a god." You smirk. "Maybe they'll hate me. Maybe they'll love you. Maybe," you say, coughing again, "they'll do both and get it wrong anyway." They both laugh. but not happily, because you've reached the final punchline, and it tastes like rust. You ask them to leave, not forever, just for a moment. They hesitate, but obey. You sit alone, in a bed that still smells faintly of incense and mould. Your body aches in places memory forgot. Your tongue is dry, but your mouth still wants to speak. So you whisper, not a philosophy, not a quote, just one sentence. If pain taught me anything, it's that no truth survives clean. No one hears it, which makes it your most honest work. You lie back, stare at the ceiling. There's a crack in the plaster. It looks like a lightning bolt, or maybe a split skull, you can't tell. Doesn't matter, because the last thing you remember, before the room darkens, is the wheel. Your back arched, your bones broken, your mouth open in a scream that never ended. And the crowd, they cheered. Not because they hated you, but because you made their afternoon interesting. And in that moment, you understood Rome, not as an empire, not as a place, but as a performance. You weren't executed, you were cast, and you played the role so well, they never let you leave the stage. Even now, you don't die, you exit. And somewhere across the empire, a new boy reads your name in a classroom. He raises his hand and asks, "Did he really suffer?" The teacher hesitates, then says, "That depends on what you mean by real." And the story begins again. So what does that say about us?